So as you know, today my talk and topic is to overcome the anxiety of API testing. So I'm not representing any company, any solution, any technology, anything. It's purely human. I've been working for 15 years in IT. I started out as a developer back in Bangalore with SAP, then assumed different roles as a part of Agile development team. I was a product owner, I was a Scrum Master, and then moved to London to support my family, to be with my husband. Then I worked here for a few companies like ASOS, Lloyds Banking Group. 3 years ago, we moved to Netherlands, and currently I'm working as an engineering manager at Litho. So I'm summing up my entire experience, and the hero of my story is the APIs and how we deal with it. So let me give a little bit introduction about myself. Like I said, I'm an engineering manager at Litho, and I'm a very strong accessibility advocate. I help development teams onboard inclusive development more seamlessly than seeing it as a technical debt and then kind of like, overlooking things and just don't want to do it, kind of. I run a very active meetup group called APIscene with a special focus towards learning about testing and developing APIs. So so feel free to join this group. The vision of this group is to give a very safe learning environment for everybody. I'm also recognized as Postman Supernova simply because of the job that I've been doing out in the community and helping people onboard API testing. Those are my channels where you can connect. Now, before I start the story, there is something that I have to bring it up, which is about the assumptions that goes behind the testing. When we speak about testing or software testing, everything is generic, There is not much of a thought being given. It's a testing, everyone can do, anything can be done, it can be learned, right? It doesn't need any special things that's like a booster that's needed like a developer or a product owner kind of role. It's not true. It's a skill in itself. It's much more than a tools. It needs a cognitive abilities. It needs a creative thinking. It needs problem solving skills and much deeper than we think about. So this is one myth I want to break it when it comes to software testing. So if you're dealing with the teams and if you think anybody can do the job, no, that's not true. And how this connects to my story, you can see how the story unfolds. I started working back in 2009 with SAP, like I said, and I was in my own fantasy world thinking, okay, everybody who gets out of the engineering, especially the computer science engineering, are the one who's gonna land up to become a developer or a tester or whatever with regards to, so it's being novice there, right? Sounds stupid. Yes, I was. Until in 2013 when I was given a job to hire a test engineer for my team. And then we had 300 applications applied for SAP. And I'm like hurriedly going through all the applications to find just 10 or 15 applications actually coming from the computer science background, but rest all from the different dimensions and different parts of their experiences are coming. Like I've seen people coming like dancers, professional swimmers, visual arts, home science, from varied spectrums of life, and maybe they want to try their luck in IT for the better life, for the better earning. Development is something which gives a cold stare. It's not easy, and not everybody would like to jump in directly. So the only one portal for them to come in is software testing, and everybody want to make a life through software testing. They want to get in by taking some courses and making up their life, trying to wrap their head around. So this is a background. I was thinking, this is not true, but this myth, it was a big thing that I had to get out. And for me personally also, this was a learning curve. And it's also true not just in Bangalore. London was also the place where I found, and it's a lot more challenging when I'm there in Netherlands. Because it's simply not an easy case where STEM is chosen. Back home, it's a different story. But I had to open up my eyes, digest so many other things to understand. People make choices other than the usual STEM education that's required. So we have to open up our teams, and when we hire, we have to help them onboard as quick as possible, meeting the delivery guidelines or delivery deadlines. When we look at the test preferences, like I said, I'm very active in the mentoring clubs. I'm active in the meetups, testing communities. Summing up all the experiences and meeting the people, this is a graph I can draw easily. When a testing opportunity is given, I want to have and interact through the UI, not any other deeper layers. It's easier for me. It's easier for me to digest, come up with more user scenarios. I can see what is happening. I can see when the error is coming. There is something moving. So it keeps me on toes. and I understand better. But when you ask test engineers what is their preference and favored method of testing, 70% of them chose to do or associate with the UI testing. But hardly 30% chose to do API. And in that, again, in the 30%, if you really have to break down, there were only 4 or 5 females and rest were male. So this is the skew. Now, with all the keynotes or all the other talks that's been happening from the morning, you already see where API stands in our market and its importance. If you see the key drivers of the API after coming in the future, the source from the salt, the platform and the system integrations are using more than 49% of implementations in API, and so goes the rest of the parameters there, like for the development efficiency, 49%, digital transformation initiatives are 44%. So which means we are not restricted to the open banking and embedded finance only. APIs are wide across, so which means we have to satisfy and we have to be there for our teams, tested to bring in the better quality. If this is the need of the market, and if the teams are not supporting this, or the skill is not built, then there is a huge gap. So the point is how we can help this team to onboard. There are a few other observations that I did in the last 15 years, which I would like to map it across experience and expertise. So if the x-axis is experience and the y-axis is expertise, specifically with regards to API, I'm not considering anything else. So if you see the far left towards the down, mostly are the interns or the new joiners who are fresh into the industry. Everything is a question for them, it's a how-to. So, but if you see a candidate or a resource or a test engineer who have experienced a little bit, like 2 to 3 years, and no expertise at all in API, you mostly see them undergoing this imposter syndrome, especially when they're not from any technical background. So I am not the good person. I may not be the right person to do this test. I will not be able to unearth the right bugs that other person will be able to do. So I should be abstaining myself from doing this testing at all. And it takes a lot of time for me to learn technical stuff and do justice for my job. So I just don't want to do this job. By and large, more people fall into this category and they're like kind of self-imposing that they're not the right people to do this job. If you have some resources who are fairly experienced, 5 to 6 years experienced, and somehow they have come across APIs at some point in their life, they know how to send a request or see a response and read a response and things like that, they are lacking a right set of training to move themselves to the next skill level. So that's the lack of training is a big and a huge chunk of a blockage for moving to the next level of expertise in the test engineers. And moving ahead, if you see, there's a lack of documentation. Documentation has come across in every keynote, in every talk that I have heard today. It's a big blocker, not just for the developers, but for the entire team, and also for your customers. So we need to have a better documentation, which can help everybody in the arena of API, and not just the testers. Missing tools, this is a big part. It plays a very big part. So many teams I have seen, many who come into my mentoring sessions, they say that they don't see a need to invest in the tools which I can use it for my testing for the APIs. They say maybe what developer is using, you can use the same thing. So it's stopping them to explore a little bit more. Well, you can ask me, what is the need? They can always ramp up. If at all things were that easy, we all could have done that, right? So that's not the case. And going back to my first slide of the story where I told, people come from different walks of life. And we as a managers, or we as a leaders, the first job for us is to pave way, make things easy to digest, to welcome them into the team, and help them build the skills required, which in turn helps us grow faster. Now, moving to the next slide, this is from the FinTech Future, where they say 41% of the people lack the required skill set to deal with the API, whereas 34% lack maintaining the APIs. There are so many stale endpoints, unnecessary documentation, never used once, sunset features are never revisited to be removed, dead codes, whatnot. So these are the present challenges with the API. No matter what technological curve you want to hit, IoT, metaverse, banking, finance, unless at the grassroots level things are fixed, the structure is not going to stand tall. Or neither can we be more agile or scale faster. That is not possible. So how did I help my team build the skills? I have been working with the teams. I have been working with my team members who are basically non-technical. There is a challenge from the market side. There is also a challenge from the business side. We need more people, more hands on deck, and an immediate need. Not every time I can think of the other side of the world to say, okay, I'll hire a person from somewhere, other part of the world, and let them bring and integrate within our team. That's not the solution. I'm held with a budget, I'm held with the time. So yeah, so in this case, what are the different ways that I tried? The first one is a traditional training. It's specifically for the environment enterprise solutions. I don't want to spend a lot of time into this slide. I've just included because it's a part of it and fits well for the enterprise ecosystem. The more interesting one is the next one, which is a pairing. This is something that I tried even before COVID, which was mostly about face-to-face, but it also worked during COVID when we were working remote. What happens in the pairing process is a developer and a tester, they work together. And here's the rubber ducking process that happens. So developer, basically, he simply sits, he tests the API according to his knowledge, he develops his own use cases, and basically tells every action what he's doing, and also gives the reasoning behind his action. For example, here is the endpoint that I'm taking from my Confluence page. This endpoint may give me the list of the countries that I'm trying to search for. I place it in the base URL. This is the base URL. There is a verb, which means it is a get. So I key in the get, and I click on send button. When this happens, first thing I'm going to check is a status 200. So there is a story he's going to build and tell it out loud. As a test engineer, I'm going to scribe. I'm going to see what is being doing or what the developer is doing. So I basically scribe in my own language, in my own understanding. When I go back to my desk, I simply emulate the same action what the developer has done. So this is the first level of learning for the skill building for that person. It fits well for the people who are coming right out of the college, people dealing with imposter syndrome. So you don't have to cross-question, you don't have to do anything. You have a question, feel free to ask, but you don't have to do anything. So simply you're there listening, seeing what is happening. And you're going to document your own steps, how to do it. So this is a process which has to be repeated. It is not a one-step process. You have to revisit the process and then build over it. So of course, every process has its own pros and cons. If the test engineer sleeps off in between, then there is no point in doing this entire process at all, right? So there should be a presence and the focus. The test engineer should be there, making notes, scribing in their own language, in its own intensity and capacity of how these things can be done, and his own knowledge of explanation during this rubber ducking process. And then, just forget the step background. It is an optional. I forgot to put the star. It is optional, but this works well for anybody who joins the team. It's a time-intensive process, like I said. It's not something I implement today and tomorrow I see the results. It has to be revisited every 6 months, every 3 months by the leader of the team or the manager to see how effective is it. Is there a learning happening? Is there a learning curve achieved? And is a test engineer able to execute these tests all by themselves? Are they in a position to churn up more use cases and more user scenarios all by themselves, or they need help? So this is how we help them build their skill level from one level to the other. This works really well for the long-living teams. If your team is like a service-based teams, like for example, like a consulting firms or a service firms which picks up a small projects for the customers, and they put things together and they dismantle and they go to another project. This is not going to work, because for any process to work, the first thing is a trust. You have to build the trust between the developer and the tester in the team. So for this trust building process, if there is a dismantling team every 3 months, it's not going to stick long. So it works really well for the long living team, at least an year long. They should be working together, and the balanced team. One test engineer working against 5 or 10 super productive developers is a common sight in every team. Let me tell you, if this is a thing, please revisit your team. Give them some air. That's, yeah, it's a test engineer. What all they do is sit and test. It's enough. Yeah, 1 test engineer, 2 test engineer. No, that's not going to happen. That's not how it is. The quality cannot be defined like that. So you have to revisit your team to see what's the product output, productivity level happening, and how many test engineers you may need to satisfy this deliverables that is coming in for your testing. The next one I tried is with regards to the testing handoff. So as the name gives off, the developer develops the API, writes the unit tests, writes the integration tests, and hands off the entire bunch to the test engineering team. It may be 1 person or a bunch of people. And as a test engineering team, my responsibility is to execute the tests on a regular basis, fix the failing tests, maintain these tests. So this gives me an opportunity to interact with the code where I am not under pressure to set up the entire framework from the scratch. The framework is there, test is running. So my opportunity here is to learn how I can deal with this code so that I can do small fixes and make this code working again. And when this learning curve goes in, they will reach a point where they can start adding more tests all by themselves. So there is this learning, and this has worked wonderfully well for the people who are at least some experience, like 5 to 6 years of experience in the industry. They have dealt or heard APIs in some way, they have seen it, and now they get the opportunity to interact with it, either through a JavaScript code, Java's code, whatever it is. But then there is an opportunity for them to interact, digest the code, start adding the tests, and slowly I have seen people grown to a position of setting up an entire framework ground up. So this is one other model which I have tried. The last one is my absolute favorite, which I've been doing for the last 3 years now. Oh, I didn't tell the pros and cons. The pros and cons, you got to have a basic concepts. The test engineer should know the basic concept. If you're applying this process, the testing handoff on a fresher or someone who doesn't understand anything about API or hearing first time about the API, it's not going to work. They go back to this imposter syndrome issue. So the person should be knowing the basic concepts. It should be a self-managing team. If you have a team where you constantly have to overlook on what they are doing, how much they are delivering, this is not going to work, because at the end of the day, if there are failing tests, it's going to grow as a debt, and then it's forgotten, and then you're back to the quadrant one all over again. Of course, balanced team is a must and should in all of these. The anchor part of this process is a test ops. Of course, we all follow DevOps in our development process. What is this test ops? Do we need anything that's entirely separate? Isn't it under the DevOps routine itself? Of course, it is a part of a DevOps routine. There is nothing new that's come. It's just an enhancement to tell you that you need a separate test environment. It should be a data, clean and sanitized data, and the availability of the systems and the users, everything has to be created for this test environment. So which basically is covered under the concept of test ops. So yeah, so this is the last one, which is my absolute favorite, which is the low-code tools. The one what you're seeing on screen is a visual flow. This is a new feature that's released by Postman. Okay, so I know it's not so legible or visually visible, but in this, what happens? Every block talks an action. It is technical, yet not deeply technical that I have to run away from the solution, right? I'm able to help people to understand how you can use the API and use it for your testing routine, where each block has its specific action to do. Like there is a send block, then there is a condition block, then there is a loop block. If I have to do the same thing with my code, I'm going to have to write everything from the scratch. If some condition, then try catch block, then some exception, then raise this, raise that. It can get complex. No, it's not a game for everybody. I'm not talking about developers. We're dealing with test engineers here. So again, I want to emphasize that fact. So when you give such blocks, it's easier for them to communicate with the system and see, all right, so first if I have to make this API work, I have to send a call, which means I have to use a send block. And then when this sends, there is a response which is coming out from this block, which I can capture and put some condition on. And when I put a condition, there is a response body which I'm trying to process and see if so-and-so blah, blah, blah exists. And I can carry out my tests. This has helped my team in the last 6 to 7 months. There is a positive impact in using and onboarding this solution. I'm not saying Postman is the only one which you should be using. I'm not here to sell. But this has helped me. There may be other tools in the market which I want to encourage you to go and try and see what fits well to your ecosystem, and then onboard that and help your test engineering teams to up their game when it comes to testing, and not just restrict themselves with the UI testing. So the positives and some positives of this are it can be implemented to any team, absolutely. If it's a frequently dismantled team or a new team formed, you're into the merger and there is like 2 teams from a different geographies working. Like in my case, we have 2 teams, one in Netherlands and one in US. And we recently went through the merger, so you can guess all sorts of challenges that you have when you're in the merger situation. There is a quick onboarding. There is not much of technical concepts that you have to dive deeper. It's all about connecting the ideas, bringing in your cognitive skills to see how I can plot my entire API integration, how they're interacting with each other, what is a response body, how I can access this response body, and then how I can build my tests on top of that. There is a visual impact, like in UI, they favor UI simply because I can see what's happening in the UI. Now that's bought again as that visual impact you can see, where it's passing, where it's failing, where the controls are going, all those things. And it fits with any tech stack, so yeah, you don't have to do much of a process change. It just fits well with your existing ecosystem. So this is, I actually had removed the slide, and then I thought, after hearing all the talks today, I thought this is very much important, because this is the data that I have been collecting for the last 15 years, where I reach out to the people, to the teams, and then like literally making my own Excel sheet, asking them what is their basic challenge when they are dealing with the APIs. More than 60% of them are pointing at documentation. So you can see in the last 15 years, if I worked with nearly 6 companies, I worked with quite a bit spread of people. And then I have mentoring sessions where I meet people on every daily basis. Then there is a community which I run where, again, I ask these questions more impromptu and then try and take these answers. More than 60% are hinting at documentation, which is a big issue. Test environments are not non-availability of test environments is a big issue. There is no supportive tools, so which means if you are a manager, the leader of your team, please do an inward check of if your test engineering team need any special support to do their job. And nearly 23% of them mentioned at the ops support. This is something that I want to leave it with you, which is called API test maturity model. So this model starts with rating 1 to rating 5. 1 is the absolute worst, and 5 is the la-la land. We all want to be in that la-la land of super, everything is working super fine, super flowery, super rosy. So 1 is an abstracted where I call there are no tests, there is nothing. You simply develop API and just move this API to the production. There's absolutely nothing. So that's like level sub-0 minus. I'm pretty sure no teams are here, but if you're here, then it's a very worst place to be. And 2 is a limited capacity. You have APIs, you're focused towards customers, you're too busy developing it, and you have some selective process of unit tests being created for your APIs, which majorly driven by your developers, no test engineers are involved. Again, it's not a great place to be. So yeah, so this is a takeaway slide for you to analyze and assess where your team lies when it comes to this model. If you're in the team 5, which is a team driven, the best place to be, which I'm pretty sure no. Most of the teams are either in 3 or 4. 4 is again very less, 3 mostly. And help your teams to onboard API testing with more confidence and yeah, onboard it as soon as possible and help them do their job better. You can contact me in any of these handles. I'll be happy to connect and discuss more if you have any questions. This is the time you can hit me with more questions, if you have. Thank you.